So the Sustainable Development Goals that were agreed by the members of the United Nations in September 2015 are designed to be universal. They apply to the whole world, to all peoples and to all nations. If we don't have every country taking action on climate change, if we don't have every country focusing on the conditions of the oceans and the seas, the consequences will be bad for everybody in the world. That's why, in the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, every country is a developing country. The Millennium Development Goals were a set of goals that were agreed should be applied to the world's developing nations. And because they were about activities that were to be undertaken in a subset of countries, there were always ambiguities as to who was responsible for them to be realized. Was it the people and governments of the countries themselves? Was it the people and governments of countries that provide development assistance? Or were they a global responsibility? I think for most people, the Millennium Development Goals were seen as a global responsibility. But because there were some uncertainties, when the Sustainable Development Goals were developed and then agreed in 2015, it was clear to all that responsibility for their implementation rests with the leaders and governments of all nations. It's a collective responsibility, and indeed all 193 nations of the world have themselves accepted this responsibility in a total way. The Sustainable Development Goals represent this long-term plan for people and for the planet. They are reflecting some of the global imperatives for the future, not just of current generations, but of generations to come. Now, when you've got goals that are the responsibility of all, it's extremely important to have mechanisms that enable collective responsibility to be taken to ensure that the necessary actions are implemented. To do this, systems of governance are key. They're actually systems that look at the political process through which decisions are made to ensure the goals are achieved. Some of these decisions relate to the extent to which people can access the things that they need for life, like health or education or water. And one of the goals reflects the importance of having rule of law and institutions that ensure justice, particularly when it comes to the resolution of conflict, resolution in ways that are non-violent. You could actually argue that all the goals require that kind of institutional capacity for them to be properly implemented. Institutional capacity that permits non-violent management of conflict and that encourages redistribution in favour of those who are most likely to be left behind. Politics is all about how people access and use power for themselves or for their communities, for their families, because power is a key variable to determine whether or not people are able to look after themselves and get what they need. When used well, power is remarkable. It can lead to real transformations that bring benefits to everybody. In the United Nations, the Department of Political Affairs is one of the entities which helps to ensure that people are able to benefit from the proper use of power and to avoid the misuse of power. I believe that the work of the Department of Political Affairs, particularly its preventive diplomacy, is absolutely critical to being able to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. And I believe that the work in the Department of Political Affairs that addresses what happens when power is misused is critical for helping to remedy situations that are working against people's interests and to hopefully achieve rapidly a rebalancing so that power is properly used for all.